Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host, Dan Maisey, dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. Joining us on the podcast today is Skip Gilbert, a highly accomplished strategic executive and the Chief Executive Officer at U.S. Youth Soccer. With a remarkable track record in both profit and non-profit executive management, Skip has proven his expertise across the business spectrum, from sales to strategy to finance and much more. His leadership extends beyond corporate success into the realm of sports, where he has played soccer internationally and has been elected into both the University of Vermont and the Lawrenceville School Athletic Hall of Fame. At US Youth Soccer, Skip focuses on having a positive impact on the lives of America's youth through soccer, embodying his passion, integrity, trust, accountability, and responsibility. His extensive experience, including roles with the US Anti-Doping Agency and the US Tennis Association, showcases his ability to act as a change agent, making him an invaluable voice on the topics that we will cover in this podcast. Skip, welcome to Talent Talks. Great to have you.
Well, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. I'm almost impressed by what you said about me. I didn't realize I had that kind of background.
Yeah, I've said this before, and I've also said this bit before, but more than welcome to take that for your LinkedIn if you want to. Let's get straight into it. We ask this to each of the guests that we have on as the starter question. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired, and what are your lessons learned?
You know, having the career that I've had, where I started off in the publishing industry, took a jump over into the property side, and then worked with a number of different NGBs within the Olympic movement. Certainly I've been on the getting hired side. And then as you get higher and higher in the hierarchy of any organization, there isn't, here at US Youth, there isn't a person hired on our team that doesn't have to come through my office to make sure that, not only strategically are they the right person for the role, but culturally that they're going to fit with what we're trying to do with the organization and where we try to go. So from that standpoint, I guess I hit both sides of the equation.
And it's clear then from that answer there that you take a active role in recruitment of US Youth Soccer. What's your role in that in comparison to potentially some of your team members?
It's almost a circular route. I come in at the very beginning to look at the strategic direction that position's going to, whether it's a new position or whether we need to fill a role, just to make sure everybody is on the right page as to, what's going to be the skill sets, what are we looking to hire, what's the level of experience do we need. And then once we do that, I kind of walk away from it. We have managers and directors that are charged with doing all of that work to make sure that they can cultivate, from all of the resumes that come in and all of the interviews that they have, they get it down to one, maybe two people. And then ultimately I circle back, meet with generally the two, maybe three final candidates and give my opinion one way or the other. Hopefully it aligns with, what the department wants with the individual. Not too often, but occasionally, we'll see things a little bit differently. And I guess because of my position, I guess I have a little bit more of an impact in that. But overall, it's that, I want to make sure that the team is comfortable with who they're bringing in. But ultimately, it's my responsibility that the person is a fit within the organization.
And there's a couple of things that I want to unpack there, but just on what you've said at the end, what is it that you do specifically? What your part of the interview at the end there when you come in? What are you looking for? What are the things that show you this is the person that I need to hire?
Depending on the position, and if I'm going to be interviewing two or three people, separately from what the team has been asking, I will come up with 5, 6, 7 specific questions that I will ask each of them. And to some degree, it's not so much the actual verbiage of what they say, it's how they take me from point A to point B. Because especially in sport, and and this is, one of the great things about our game, is that when you're on the field of play, your creativity, your skill, your talent, will be able, your ingenuity, you'll be able to react to different situations really helps to build the base of the player. It's the same thing in the workforce. So when I talk to people, I'm asking various questions as to, why have you gotten to this point? Why should we hire you? If you were me, why would we hire you? To be able to just see how they think on their feet and to be able to articulate the message from point B, to point C.
Mm.
And if they do that, again, as long as I can get the sense that, sure, they have all the skill sets that is required for the position, they have the ability to do the job. Will they fit culturally with our staff, our volunteers, the state associations, all of the different constituents? But also, is there that intangible inside to know that they're going to keep pushing to advance their career, that they're not going to want to just be in position X for the next 30 years, that they're ultimately going to, whether it's my role or, a director role or somewhere else, so that you can see that, they're here to do something, but they're also here to do something for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, you're hiring for the future success of your organization, not for the nows. It's really interesting. When there is a disagreement or a difference of opinion rather than a disagreement between you and the team that have taken those candidates to the final three, is there a general theme around what that is in terms of what the candidate is or isn't displaying, and how do you counter that in terms of, you put a lot of trust and emphasis on your teams doing a lot of the work and doing it for you, doing it with you. But how do you then have that conversation that you go, well, actually, I don't think that's the right person because of X, Y, and Z?
And it's a fine line, because you really want to trust your team to
Yeah.
be able to bring the right person in. But occasionally there's just something that, in my role and for those in my role, they might be seeing that the other team didn't. And it's not just a one-way street. I mean, there have been times where I think, all right, well, this person, but then when I talk to the hiring manager, they'll be like, well, did you see this, this, and this? And I'll be like, I missed that. Good call. And ultimately, when you sit down and you start talking about your final candidates, generally speaking, the right candidate is going to merge at the top, and we'll ultimately get there. I mean, again, that's the mark of a good team, is to be able to work with each other to understand the nuances that each person is trying to articulate, but then come to the right decision for the organization. And very rarely, and I can't even remember a time where, someone was adamant that they wanted to hire, person A, and I came in and said, not a chance, person B. Generally speaking, if we're at that point, we kind of compromise and we either go back to the drawing board, but ultimately we're all comfortable with who comes into that role.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had any instances where you're all comfortable with that person that comes into the role, but ultimately 2, 3, 4 months down the line, you've realized that they're not the right fit and they've got the right skill set, but potentially not the right values or the right cultural fit? How have you dealt with that, and how have you dealt with that from your side, but also actually the candidate employee side?
Yeah, and we actually did that last year, where we had someone come into a certain role. It was a new role, and it was a role that, well, I won't get into the politics of it, but it was a role that was sort of planted on us, and we knew going in that this was going to be a very difficult transition for the individual. And the individual came in, and it just was not the right fit. There just wasn't the 24/7 requirements for that position. So ultimately, in order to fill their day, they went on sort of fishing trips to try to do, X, Y, and Z. And actually, it was in an HR role, and it just didn't work. So you come to a point where, you either just let it go and it's to the demise of the organization, or you make the change. And we kind of eliminated that role. And afterwards, that person had even said they didn't even know what they were going to do 6 months down the road, that it just, it wasn't the right fit for anybody. But at the end of the day, you just have to know that, sure, whenever you make a change, you're impacting someone's life. and their livelihood. And you hate to have those conversations, but if it's in their best interest and in the best interest of the organization, you really have no choice but to make that move.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to cultural or value based challenges, the individual tends to know as much as the company. And it might take a few months to come to the realization, but actually you then go, you know what, this isn't, I wouldn't be progressing as I want to be progressing in that organization as much as the organization isn't progressing with me being there. You mentioned around the kind of, we touched on the kind of politics and the governance side of things. With your role and with US youth soccer, you have a lot of various stakeholders. How does that impact your hiring decisions?
Yeah, that's another fine line, because you've got multiple constituent groups. I mean, again, if you look at US youth soccer, we have a board, and unlike some sport boards, our board is more visionary, strategic in scope. They are not operational. And our board chairs, now, our Todd Lockharter's our current chair, is very adamant that the board does not want to get into the operational day to day. So that's very good. We then also have 54 state associations. Some of our states have two associations within it. And between their staff and their boards, it's a mix between visionary and operational, basically decide on the side. So some are in that mindset that they're operational in scope, and so they feel they have the right to use their voice to tell us who we should hire. And it's a delicate balance because we don't want to just put the hands up and say, look, this is our world, please don't come into it, because we want them to have a voice and their opinions are important. But at the same token, at the end of the day, if we make a disastrous hire and it impacts the overall scope of the organization, the state association or anybody outside of our staff is sort of going to continue wandering and doing what they're doing, where we're the ones that are going to be held accountable for it.
And have to deal with the fallout. No, completely understand. I want to dig into your experience a little bit. You've worked across a number of organizations, across a number of different sectors. What are the things that you've seen throughout when you're hiring? What are the things that you've seen that you have kept from day one? This is the best thing that I can do to include in the hiring process, versus we need to make sure that this never happens again. What do you do now that potentially you didn't do at the beginning? And similarly, what do you still do now that you did do at the beginning?
I think, I'll look at it from, when I'm actually applying for roles. It's one of those things. I'm a big believer that, sure, you can go through all of the different interviews and be very factual and get from point A to point B very, very clearly. But there are times where you also want to show creativity, ingenuity, and stepping outside the box. And I'll use an example. When I was in the publishing world, I was with the Sporting News, which had been around for 100 years and was just considered the Bible of baseball. And we had a great team. It was a great experience. I was at the Olympics down in Atlanta in '96, and I saw Hank Steinbrecher, who was the head of U.S. soccer, walking across the field. And I took his picture because he used to coach BU when I played up at UVM in college. And back then, no digital cameras, so I got the picture of Hank walking across the field, and I thought, what am I going to do with this? So on the back of it, I wrote a note to Hank, and I said, hey, Hank, you never know who's watching you. Good to see you. Congratulations on the Olympic gold. If you're ever looking to bring your sales and marketing in-house, given my background, given my business experience, I'd be your best guy. 2 months later, I was hired by U.S. Soccer to launch their internal sales and marketing arm. So it's that kind of ingenuity that makes you stand out. And they weren't looking for anybody to do that. But because I had opened the door and creatively showed how I could do something, all of a sudden there I was. On the flip side, when I'm interviewing people, the worst thing in the world someone can do, and I'll use going back to my Sporting News days, I would be interviewing for a sales rep, and someone would walk in and spend the first 10 minutes telling me what a great sports fan they are and how they love the Yankees and they love the Giants and the Jets because we were New York based. And, to me, that's the last thing I want. I don't really want to hire a sports fan. Everybody's a sports fan. I want you to tell me, how are you going to sell more pages? And so being a sports fan is nice, but there's a certain place that you bring that into the conversation. You don't start with it. And to me, that gave me, that person didn't get hired because, again, he didn't convince me that he could actually bring something to the organization that was going to help our organization do better.
Yeah, it's articulating the value that you can bring, not the fun that you think you can have. It's similar to we interviewed a guy called Murray Barnett on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said exactly the same thing. If someone says they're a sports fan, that's not what I'm interested in, because you don't sit and talk about sports all day. It would be lovely if you did, but you don't. You've got a job to do. And on that, then, do you? And this might be slightly different in the US market, but do you look outside of the the traditional sports experience for people that you like to bring into the organizations?
And again, I'm going to go back to my soccer roots. There was one summer when in New York. I was playing college, and I played on a team, and quite frankly, I was the only white guy on the team, and we had a great season. As a matter of fact, I was MVP of the league, and I still to this day have that trophy because my name was SKIT. They thought I was Skip Gilbert. And it just showed that, it doesn't matter who you are when you're on the field to play. And so when it comes to, roles in the company, sure, we would like for someone to be a soccer player because they understand the dynamics of what we're trying to do. But realistically, when we're looking to hire someone, it doesn't matter who they are, their background, their culture, their ethnicity, their whether they play football, soccer, baseball, or they're not even athletic. We want the best person for the job that's going to be able to do what we need them to do and more.
And has that influenced the diversity that you have at US Youth Soccer, but also at your previous organisations, and not necessarily just diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, etc., but actually that diversity of thought as well, which is a key theme that keeps coming up, is getting people in that aren't yes people. They're people that you need to challenge as well as fit the values and the culture, and etc.
Yeah, and again, no matter where I've been, that it's it is the ultimate priority is sure, we want the best person for the role. I think the challenge, in order to be able to embrace the DE&I ethic that is so prevalent in today, is you really need to ensure that you're when you're advertising for the role, that you're hitting those diverse populations. If you're only going to go where a certain segment of society is going to see the ad, then that's the only type of candidate you're going to get. But if you're able to push the word out, all over, then you're going to get a very much different and more diverse pool of candidates for the role. And again, depending on the position, sometimes you can go in one direction, you can go in another. It really ultimately depends on what the role is and then the talent pool that is sitting in front of you.
And similarly related to that, how do you make sure that you're obviously looking for a value set, you're looking for a cultural fit? How do you make sure that you do get that diversity of thought when you are looking for somebody that does have the same values, that does have the same cultural fit? How do you make sure that that difference and that openness to be a bit more argumentative is not the right word, but how do you make sure that that diversity of thought is there when you are so focused on, especially your part of the interview, so focused on the values and the culture side?
I think part of it can come down to the questions you ask. I think again, if you put questions in front of someone that will challenge their thought, or allow them to express how they've been able to use their voice, their background, their experiences to help change the dynamic of an organization, that enables you to really see, is this person going to be just a yes person that will, get the job done? Or is this person going to peel back some of those layers and say, what if we do this? What if we do that? And I'm a big what if person myself, always looking for different ideas to be able to shape the future of the organization. And if you get people like that, then you know that, at least from my position, if I say what if, well, someone's going to take that and take my what if and match it with a few other what ifs. And what we get back could be something that nobody really thought about because, perhaps, I don't have the background experiences that could bring that type of a perspective into the equation.
That's really interesting. In terms of the recruitment side of it, do you use things like tech, and how have you seen that change over the period of time that you've been recruiting into roles?
You know, I mean, I think one of my concerns, is the onset of AI
Mm.
because and how tech can influence the hiring process. Because what it comes down to then is, if I get someone's resume or a cover letter or a follow up letter, am I truly getting their school of thought or their thought, or is it a computer generated based on, I need to send this person a thank you note, and suddenly something comes out on the computer? Well, that's great if we're going to hire, your laptop, but we're hiring you as a person, and we really want you to see. So there's no way for me to know at this point if what I get is truly a reflection of that individual or their ability to Google something that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, it makes it to some degree a little bit more difficult. I think it makes it a lot easier for applying for a role if you want to use that technology, but it makes it harder for those on the receiving end to be able to truly select the best candidate. We hope we do, and that's why you interview people, so you can get the verbal confirmation that what they wrote is actually their words.
Yeah. And I suppose, again, it comes down to when you're interviewing them, you're using your experience to understand exactly how they are putting their experience across. Because you can, even on a normal CV, if you don't use technology or AI to write it, as an example, you can still write a lot of things on there that don't necessarily reflect the experience that you've got in the politest way possible. And I think that's ultimately a challenge with the CV in general, in my opinion. But, that's a topic for a different time, a different conversation.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Oh, we'll get to that. But actually, on that point, Skip, we're at 25 minutes already, which is the time for the final quick fire questions. It's been a fascinating conversation, and that's, we will have a second version of this podcast, I'm sure, your schedule allowing, of course. But we ask these three quickfire questions to every single guest. And so we'll start with the first one. What is your most frustrating thing about recruitment?
I think AI coming into the picture is one, but it goes hand in hand with the lack of personal connection.
Mm.
In the sense, you hear it all the time. People will apply for a job and never get a response. Not even a computer generated, thank you very much for taking the time to try to apply to our role. So for me, whenever someone applies, we want to at least thank them and say, no, we have someone, or yes, come on into the interviewing process. So I think technology has hurt us on the AI, but also depersonalized the connection you make with the candidate and the company.
I agree. On the flip side to that, there are also, technology also makes it much easier to ensure that everybody is responded to, and that candidate care is at the forefront, which I completely agree with you. In this day and age, a candidate being ghosted is completely unacceptable. But I also understand that without really understanding and without really kind of grasping what is possible in terms of the tech, you are beholden to the time you've got and the jobs that you've got to do. Sorry, I digress there. Number two, you don't have to name them, but you're more than welcome to. Who has been your best hire and why?
I won't do anything with U.S. Youth, but overall, my best hire, hands down, Matt Lupton from USA Swimming. And as a matter of fact, when I left USA Swimming, and for years, and to this day, I had an agreement with his CEO that I would never hire him away from swimming, but I could use him for projects that we would contribute to his kids' college fund because he was so skilled, he was so creative. Again, hands down, the best. And he's still, I think I hired him in 98 and he's still at USA Swimming. So best hire for them, best hire for me.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And I think we probably already touched on this, but what's the one thing you'd change about the recruitment world?
I think the one thing, you can't turn off computers. That's the one thing. Again, I would say that the personal approach to the process, it just has to be elevated. You don't want, again, I don't want to be in a position where I'm just going to send my resume to 1,000 companies and expect that I'm going to get anything. But at the same token, as the company, I'd really not want to get 1,000 resumes from people that don't even know that they're applying to U.S. Youth. And I think that's a very dangerous step because it just wastes a lot of people's time and it just clutters the process.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway there from a candidate perspective is to make sure that you're applying for roles that not only you think you can do and you think you can add value to, but actually that, again, the organizations will align with where you want to go and what you want to do. Instead of just being a job for a couple of years, you want something that can give you the skills that even if it is a job for a couple of years, you've got the skills and you've left the organization in a much better place. So I agree with what you're saying there. Look, Skip, it's been brilliant. Thanks again for your time. It's greatly appreciated. I know how busy you are, so it's brilliant to manage to get this in. And there's a lot of things I think people can take away from our chat. So thanks for joining us on Talent Talks. Really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. It was a great conversation. Appreciate the invitation.
Not a problem. Thanks, Skip.